Big titles, big roles, but what do they actually mean? I'm Ines Hiraki, and this is From Wall Street to Main Street, breaking down business jobs one conversation at a time.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back to a new episode of From Wall Street to Main Street. Today, we have the honor of welcoming Eric Falardeau, who is a partner at McKinsey and Company. Hello, Eric. How are you today?
Good. It's good to have you guys over here.
It's great to have you as well. Thank you for being here today. So, Eric, I remember during our first conversation, the first thing you told me is that you were fascinated about how the brain works. So, how did you discover this passion and how did it guide your career choices?
At first, I'm fascinated because I don't understand it. That's what makes me. That's what makes me interested in it. Um, I discovered it early, in that I like to look at people, how they make choices, but I didn't realize it was what mattered most until I was in engineering school. Loved problem solving, wanted to find a way to make the world a greener place. And as I was realizing that all the technologies that I actually wanted to create to produce energy more sustainably already existed, then I got really curious about, if it already exists, why isn't it applied? So understanding the concept of incentives, what would drive a government to make a choice, what would drive a family to make a choice, what would drive a company to make a choice, made me realize that problem was even more exciting, and did a switch to business school from the counsel of a friend. And ever since the first class in the first book, realized that's what I had a lot more appetite
Perfect. So you studied in Concordia University, right? This is where you
for the
studied
business part. Yeah,
business part. Yeah, and previously, where was it?
Polytechnic.
Polytechnique. Okay, that's
Yeah, I
amazing.
had always done sciences. For me, it was clearly going to be sciences, sciences, sciences until that realization.
And so, can you tell us maybe or guide us through, walk us through your career from your graduation to Concordia into your current position?
A bunch of stops and ups and downs. I did a lot of little startups. I took a stop at one point. I went to live in a South African township, just to work with kids for quite a while, including I spent some time in Mozambique as well in an orphanage. Then at one point took another stop, worked in a restaurant in Montreal, which was the best restaurant in the city, spending a lot of time working there. As a result, met folks in China, which had a few bar establishments for foreigners, but like for expatriates. Asked me if I wanted to come manage their bar, gave me a pretty cool mandate, a pretty cool budget, went to do that. Went to study in Brazil. So I took a lot of breaks here
Yeah,
and
that's a
there.
really diverse.
Yeah, before getting to what I would say business career, which for me that started with a food packaging and processing company called Tetra Pak. Started in Brazil in São Paulo, moved to Canada to manage business development, until the idea of McKinsey came on the table, and for the last 12 years have been at McKinsey.
Okay, and so you said that previously you did an engineer school, so you really have a scientific education.
Yeah.
How do you think it shapes the way you think and you solve problem and you approach them?
100%. I think the foundations of problem solving, at least for me, have come from science. Hypothesis based, finding the right way to prove or disprove your hypothesis. So for me, I learned to solve problems through with the scientific method, and it's still how my head thinks every day. So
Okay.
it definitely, and more than formed it. It's like it's the
Yes.
bedrock of my education.
Do you think it depends on how the brain works for each people? Like some people are more scientific based, some other people are more like art or literature based.
Yeah, there's more than one ways to solve problems, but my mind thinks in the way that the scientific
Scientific.
methodology has taught me to solve problems, and I find it's quite applicable to the world of business and government, so I
Yeah.
use it quite a bit.
Moving on now, maybe more about your current job. Can you explain us maybe what is strategy consulting and how does the input of consumer insight change or shape the consulting?
Yeah, so strategy consulting is helping companies, governments, organizations make big important decisions when there's more than one choice and you got to stop and think about it a little bit. That could be pricing, that could be branding, that could be marketing, that could be which market should I expand into, that could be does it make sense for me to expand internationally? What is the right growth rate I should aspire? There's all kinds of questions in there. Um, as soon as the consumer enters the equation and the question is around growth, it's difficult to ignore the consumer insight, which is what is driving the consumer choice in the end. And so whether you're going to solve it through innovation, pricing, and so on, I think it's malpractice not to obsess about trying to get your best understanding as possible of the consumer. So it shapes all of these decisions, I would say, that are tied to growth, commercial decisions, innovation, you name it.
Okay. And so working in this industry, what do you do on a daily basis? Because a lot of people have this idea of a consulting doing PowerPoint all day or just reducing the cost and increasing the revenue, which is a misconception. But what do you do on a daily basis and how does it differ from what people imagine?
I wish there was a daily basis. Every single day is massively different. Um, how can I answer this? I spend a lot of time in meetings. And those meetings can be probably of three different natures. I'd say the first one is understanding.
Mhm.
So either listening to clients, listening to a situation to understand what is actually happening. It makes very little sense to go try and solve or help prior to really understanding what might be happening. So that's one of the types of meetings and can take 100 forms. Number two is advancing the problem. That'll often be with my team, almost always including the client as well. Setting aside what do we know so far? What are we trying to figure out? What's the analytical techniques we could use in order to advance the problem solving? And I'll look at what the team's prepared, presented, analyzed, and we'll have discussions on what do we think about that. And the last one, which is quite important, is presenting, but it's not, this is where maybe there's a misconception of like PowerPoint to present. The idea is mobilizing a group of intelligent people that have done something for a long time to think about a problem differently or to do things differently. So that takes quite a bit of time. Um, and you need to discuss, you need to still be in listening mode, but you need to discuss it. What have you discovered? How might it provoke a benefit of thinking about the problem or a way of doing things differently? And take the time that it takes to get to alignment and then to help the group mobilize towards that. So that's my days are a mix of that in a bunch of different ways, shape, form, locations, every single day.
Which type of meetings do you prefer out of those three?
All of them.
All of them?
I like. I love the discovering and listening ones. Those are stimulating. I like just hearing about people's businesses, people's personal situations. Love problem solving. I love doing it with teams. It's a rewarding moment to all of the work that they've done. We start getting a sense of what might help. And the last ones, which can probably be the most difficult ones, but going back to my passion for the human brain and influence, I like to figure out how can we help a group of people evolve how they choose to do things tomorrow.
So, Eric, you also lead the fitness and wellness industry at McKinsey, and you
Yeah.
call it the consumer insight capability. First of all, can you explain us maybe a little bit about how these practices work and how does it comes as a whole in the strategic consulting?
Yeah, so both are very different. I'll start with fitness and wellness. I was doing work in consumer discretionary categories because I have a passion for the human brain, so I wanted to work with companies that have to go earn the choice of people. And one of those categories, which was fascinating, partly because it's an area of interest, the world of sports activity, but also because I felt it's a sector that could use the type of help we brought to the table was fitness and wellness. So I created this group for our firm about 10 years ago and still lead it today. So this is making sure that the people that are passionate about this in our firm are close enough to understand what we do, what we're interested in, what we think the opportunities to help those who operate in the sector are. Making sure I'm connected to companies and that they know we are here if ever they want to talk, and then serving the companies when we get the opportunity to do so. So that's why.
Mhm.
Consumer insights very different. That's a capability and an input that is required to get distinctive quality recommendations. So our job there is as a firm to make sure we have the right experts on board and have the right approaches based on what is available today, technology included, AI included, to go answer questions quickly, well, to help work. So that's job number one. And then job number two is understanding that all of our partners that are doing work, whether it's strategy in the world of banking, whether it's branding for consumer companies, know how they can tap into this set of colleagues and to these approaches in order to enable getting to the best answer with their clients.
So, just to understand well, the fitness and wellness practice is kind of a different practice, but the consumer insight is an improvement of the usual strategic consulting to make the result and the advice
Yes.
better with a better input.
Yeah. One is a capability. The second one is a sphere of activity.
Okay.
So it's very different.
Okay. So you work across strategy, pricing, branding, and transformation, all things being equals. Where do you prioritize where to begin when a client wants to drive growth?
Completely depends on the mandate. In the majority of times, there is some sort of a strategic question on the table if they're wondering how should I prioritize and find a way to grow. And we need to form our own as helpers, as third-party helpers that don't yet understand their business that much. Need to form our own independent perspective to make sure we're all seeing the same thing. So there's rarely no strategy up front. It doesn't need to be big, again, depending on the question, the situation, but there's usually a little bit of grounding on a solid understanding of what we all really think is happening, supported by data, information, etc. And then after that, depends on the mandate, the situation of the company, and if the company requires help to transform, to accelerate, to do activity X. We do partner with clients and going after the impact, depending on the case. Um, so sometimes, many times, the questions will purely be strategic. We are in a very competitive industry. It's so much more competitive than 10 years ago. We have not changed prices. We're really afraid it would affect volume.
Mhm.
Should we do this? Like, where and how should that is a purely strategic question. And once we solve that with them, I'm like, perhaps we should price like this. They might say, we know exactly how to execute that. So that would be one model. Another model of, I'll go back to, hey, it's become so competitive in our sector. It could be, I'm not sure I know how to grow anymore. The path to grow is so different than what it was 15 years ago. I don't know if we have the right capabilities. I don't know if we know how to play the new sport. So maybe a bit of strategy up front to make sure, hey, where should we feel confident? Where do we
Mhm.
acknowledge a gap? But then we need to learn how to play the new sport. So can you help us find the right team, build the right capabilities, maybe go through one of two rounds together, build momentum back into the company? We always do this with clients. We never do this independently, but that would be the case of a more transformative journey.
And just a question, so what would be the add value, for example, when you receive this type of request and this type of problem? Is it more with the experience that you have done with the clients in the past that you're able to provide answer to those questions, or is it more the background, the analysis? What is really the add-on value? Is it the new perspective and the independent perspective a little bit? What is the add value from getting advice from you?
I'll start with the second one that you talked about, like the ability to break down a complex problem in a way that helps resolve it with everybody having confidence. It sounds extremely simple. It's not, and it's especially difficult. I'll go to your second point of the external outside in perspective. It's especially difficult when you're operating the business and have these 19,000
Mhm.
other realities, all of which are important, which need to happen today. It's difficult to create enough distance and step back to do it. Many people would have the ability to do this, but sometimes context makes it difficult. So the intersection in those two things, I think, brings a lot of value. And we can probably all think of things in our life where actually a friend or somebody really helps us. Gee, that's super helpful because
Mhm.
the,
They
the,
have an
the
external point of view.
exactly help simplify the problem and had a bit more distance to say, hey, maybe
Mhm.
here's what you could. And then to your last point, which I would actually put last, is the expertise. Of course, we develop pattern recognition. We spend a lot of time in the same things. The colleagues that have been spending a lot of time in a sector or in a capability for 30 years have developed impressive pattern recognition and expertise, but it's often the third component of
Mhm.
the value, and it usually starts with really understanding the right problem, breaking it down in a way that we'll be able to solve it, acknowledging what needs to be acknowledged, and then advancing.
At the beginning, we said that you were passionate about how the brain works. How do you think that this passion changes or shapes the way you advise client in their growth strategy, for example?
It changes the work that I choose to do, so that's why I'm doing a lot of consumer work. And then in the it I love listening, whether that is through surveys to what people are doing, whether that is by looking at a ton of data, look how families have made a decision here, whether it is through discussions. So that would be how it changes my work. Is in my work I have a lot of chances to listen to people, um, and I'm fascinated by it. Uh, I'm trying to understand what is really happening. What is it that, without particular expertise in it, but I think we as a species are trying to figure out more about the brain, advancing fast, but still don't have a grasp on everything. And I just absolutely love listening and trying to figure out what is it that driving that person's fear, decision, uh, reflexes, and everything.
Sometimes being receptive to all this type of information, even if it's not specifically in your line of work, like being curious and listening to all different type of things, it can bring another perspective or another information or ideas that could bring to your point of view, I feel like.
Of course.
Yes.
Yeah, of course, absolutely. So much of the information comes from that listening. So I love that most about the job. I get a lot of time either observing or listening to people talking. I like that.
So, Eric, what would be the most challenging and rewarding aspect of building something new into a large organization?
So I've had the chance to do a bit of this new business building within some of our clients. There are so many challenging things. Um, One is it is difficult for a big company to give enough oxygen and to understand how to go build something new because often they haven't done that in a while. It also creates a potential organ rejection with a sense of competition for resources and all that. So for a bunch of reasons, culturally, both to build something new and finding a way to find its place at the table is massively difficult. Building something in period is difficult. You need to figure
Yeah.
out if you can find product market fit and do that quick and make sure the economics are sound. So that's already tough to start. And why is it rewarding? Well, I think it's rewarding for two reasons. One, because it's very difficult. So if you manage to find a way to make it work, you know this was not easy. But two, because it helps companies, when it makes sense, rely more on innovation. Like, let's solve the problem it needs to be solved today. Let's solve the consumer's problem the way it needs to be solved today. And that usually for the sustainability of success, for the ability of that company to keep growing, keep differentiating, is actually quite important. So that's also rewarding. You definitely feel you're helping an organization earn its relevance for the next few years.
And what would be some example or from typical projects that you have in consulting? And maybe you can give us a brief overview of your favorite ones.
There's so many different. I mean, I was listening to questions earlier, right? Like any question could come our way. Some of my favorite type of work, I really like brand slash value proposition slash pricing. I put them all together because we think it's best solved together. Like, what is the right way to articulate a value proposition and make it to come to life at the intersection of brand, product, and price to consumers? It's a combination of a lot of analytics, of a lot of understanding the consumer as best as possible, of creativity, of how could I make this come to life. So I do a lot of that type of work. I like that a lot. Um, Building new businesses is difficult but fun. Innovation work is interesting. Uh, There's so many. There's so many.
And so most of the input or things that you analyze in strategic consulting comes from inside. So how do you convince client to act out of those insights?
Take time to listen to them. Take time to walk through these insights with them. Earlier the better, because their interpretations will be outstandingly fruitful. Like that, it'll be rich. It'll make the insight actually far better, and build the recommendation together. You can come in with a stance, but open ears shaped together. I think people are far more likely to be proud and own and want to drive something that they were a part of shaping, that they were co-architects of, than something that they purely inherited. That's not true of everybody, but it's true of most people that we have the chance to do that with. So working with your clients along a mandate, I think is the best way to have them be proud owners of it at the end.
earlier in one of our previous questions, we talked about consumer insight being an input, improving the advices and
Yeah.
the consulting. Can you briefly explain the importance of consumer insight growth led,
Yeah.
and how and why is it important now more than ever?
People can buy so many things in so many ways. Yet the human brain can't process all these choices, right? So they usually make, in most categories, they're making choices and they're considering 2, 3 things. So in this world of panoply of opportunities, which are overwhelming and tough, this competition for attention and this creativity and how do I generate consideration in this difficult world to even get a second of attention is fascinating. If you're not incredibly obsessed about in a given category where and how is somebody getting influenced to do it, I think it's almost impossible to be like right on with your recommendations. So to me, the more complex and difficult it is to get somebody's attention, the more multifaceted, multi-channel the world is on where and how can I intercept them, where and how can they buy, where and how can they get information, where and how can they talk to people, the more important it is. The less predictable it is, and therefore the more important it is to try and understand it with a lot of humility to the fact that you probably don't understand it up front.
Do you feel like in the past this consideration wasn't that much taken?
I think it's always been at the heart of business. It just maybe was a little bit more. It's always been tough, right? Like figuring out what influences somebody's choice. But the more choices, the more channels, the more like the more complexity, the tougher it is to figure out what actually mattered most. And our information systems today are actually quite complex. So I think it's more difficult today than it's been at any time in the past. The information's there, but it's not because you have a ton of information that you have clarity of insight.
Yeah.
So it's probably more difficult than it's been in the past because of how complex it is.
And do you feel like we have more tools to understand those
We
or
have a
no?
lot more tool, but that doesn't mean you have
That does make it
clarity.
easier.
In the end, what you need is very high conviction on the 3 things that matter most, on the 2 things that matter most. So it doesn't really matter how much tools and info. It matters if they help you figure out exactly what is happening and how you can act on it. They help in applications. The tools and information give a whole new set of permission and flexibility and personalization. Like, what could I do where? But if you don't understand what is it that would be most impactful, it's kind of useless. You're shooting in the dark. You're shooting in a bunch of new directions, but you don't really know what you should be doing. So I don't think it's necessarily easier. We have tools,
Yeah.
not easier.
But so actually talking about those insight and the difficulty of finding out what is the information, has it ever happened that, for example, the team or your initial insight contradicts with the client's belief, and how do you handle this type of situation?
Yeah, a lot, a lot, a lot. And very often. And to me, the few things there, like going back to your questions on the scientific methodology, like, right, having a good set of hypotheses up front to go try and validate or disprove means there'll be different hypotheses on the table, and that's fine. So I think the way to handle it there is to help people embrace that process, right? Like it's okay to have conflicting hypotheses. And the other one, I think, is just to own the comfort of being able to share not even contradictory, but to share your own opinion or what you're seeing and why, and to be comfortable with the fact that that might not be exactly aligned with the person in front of you, and that's okay. We will cooperate to go figure out, who cares who was right or wrong. What matters is we have high conviction in what we choose to do tomorrow. So a combination of that usually helps.
Okay, so now we talk about like maybe a contradiction in between two beliefs. But what
Yeah,
happens if, for example, the data is saying something, but your human insight and understanding says something else? How do you balance those two insights?
that's difficult. In most difficult problems, you will triangulate, or we will choose to triangulate in order to figure out what we think might be happening. Because it's too complex and too difficult to believe in one singular equation of like, oh, look, for sure this is the answer. And almost always in triangulation, things will point you in a certain direction, but then it won't be perfect. If it's polar opposite, your hypothesis is probably off, but it happens very often. And it is difficult in these complex decisions to be 100% sure you're right. So I think what the two things we do is we use triangulation and we embrace the imperfection of the reconciliation. We respect it, and then we bring many different perspectives around the table to discuss it. And at one point, you got to make a call. The data's in few cases the data will make the call for you. So
Okay.
you have to make the call in the end. The data will help you in making a decision, but it's rare that it's 100% certainty. It's almost never 100% certainty as a result of a calculation.
And so talking about data, so how has the consulting industry has evolved since you started? Is it more data driven now, or do you feel it's more and still around human perception?
It's always been extremely data driven. It continues to be extremely data driven. There is more data, there's more ways to access it, so there is more data. But McKinsey consulting in general, McKinsey definitely always been very, very data driven. Um, the instinct to me is more in the hypotheses up front, right? And but it's not so much as we consider hypotheses to figure out what we actually think is happening, that this is data driven.
Okay.
Now, sometimes it might be interviews, qualitative, which is a little bit less like pure data points. So there's a triangulation of sources to figure out what we think is here, but we don't. The instinct doesn't make the call. We let the information permit a process of discussion amongst 12, 15, 20 people with a client and us to get to a decision.
Do you feel like your scientific background and education impact that? For example, when you're studying mathematics or engineer, there is one result, which is a number. And if you get like 1% higher, 1% lower, it's false. For example, it's an exact number. Do you feel like this perception and this way of thinking has shaped you into a more data driven approach, or do you don't feel it changes anything?
I don't. Well, it definitely changes things. It's the base of how my head thinks to solve a problem. But I think that's okay. If anything, what studying science has shaped is at any given point, what we think to be true reflects the best of our knowledge today. So to me, it's this the understanding of science's evolution breeds humility. It's like you have huge conviction today, but you might realize you were wrong in 5 years. So that would be the bigger thing from
Yes.
science of like the comfort in making a decision with a lot of the information that you have today, and being okay with the fact that that might be wrong tomorrow, and
Yes.
being okay with the fact that somebody challenges it.
Yeah.
um yeah, embracing the process and the quest rather than the necessity of being right. I
Mhm.
think that's the scientific story.
Yeah.
That's probably what shaped me most, probably helps quite a bit in consulting.
Yeah, so many things in science have shown that. Just as an example, saying that the Earth was flat at the beginning, and then everything changed when they proved otherwise. So you build all your beliefs and hypotheses based on what you think is true, but sometimes some of the things that you acquire and think that it's basic knowledge, they might be false as well. So
It's
that's
a
a
quest for continuous improvement in knowledge and understanding.
yes, exactly. And Eric, you actually had the chance to work all across the world, knowing that it's not flat. Many countries, more than 20
How do you
countries.
know? I know it's not.
Yeah, maybe it's false again. So we don't know. We never know. And so you worked in many countries,
Yeah.
USA, Mexico. I cannot tell all of them because there is so many of them.
Yeah.
But what I want to know is that how does that international approach changes the way you think and the way you approach problem? And also, is there any specificities or differences in between the different countries you worked in the consumer insight?
Yeah. Well, I'll start with the last part. Like, there's obviously big differences everywhere. Um, to the first part of your question, it's fascinating to somebody who's fascinated by the human brain, seeing how different cultures have evolved, how that affects how they interact between each other at times. The opportunity we have is if we're partnering with a client, it's usually something of the top importance to them, and sometimes that generates a little bit of stress. That matters. We got to get it right. This is meaningful to the existence or the continuing of the company. So it's that highlights cultural differences because you're putting people at moments of stress of high priority with different opinions, etc. So it's fascinating to somebody who likes the human brain to observe those differences. And then again, it breeds humility because it's you. There's so much you don't know and how they're going to make decisions, and uh, I think it's one of the things I've appreciated the most about my career so far is it's brought me to I have no idea how many countries at moments of decision making and partnership, intense partnership. I've learned a lot from that. People that see the world differently, that think differently, that have grown under different cultural um, cultural influences, that have different beliefs and prioritizations when it comes to family. When it like
Yeah,
that's been
that's impressive.
a very big
Yeah.
opportunity.
Okay. Yeah, that's amazing. I wish I could live that way one day. I wish.
It's uh it's tiring,
But
but it's
you learn
exciting.
a lot. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Moving on now to the last part of our interview, the advice section. We want to get some advice from you. For example, when we compare, it could be anything like soft skills, could be storytelling, or technical skills like data analysis. What type of skills do you think are required to be able to perform well in the strategy consulting industry?
So I think the problem solving component of it is clear. So I think consuming information, understanding how to break it down, how to structure information, how to interpret it, how to calculate, like all of that. But I think people know that. So I'll spend less focus there. But I do think that when it comes to those skills, I think are clear. But then to me, there's a second hard skill, and there was this communication, listening, communicate. That is massively important because if you come up with a good answer alone and nobody wants to listen to it, you won't go very far. So the building continuous improvement in your ability to actively listen, communicate effectively across different contexts, audiences, situations is huge. You'll build this throughout your career, but you can practice that from day one. So that's it's, if anything, is like not pushed hard enough, in my opinion, in university programs at schools. It's communication,
Hmm.
so important in work. And then yeah, the soft skills of building trust, finding ways to influence in times of tension. You can learn that, you can practice that, but a lot of it comes from a bunch of experiences you've had in your life. That to me, the more you expose yourself to different situations, different people, the more you try to understand, reconcile, have influence, gain trust, I think the more you'll practice. There's a lot, but those three come to
Hmm.
mind. Like it's a team sport, both with your client and you. You have to be able to build trust and relationships, but and then a few hard skills from communication to breaking down a problem and solving it,
So,
obviously needed.
yeah, you have been able to acquire this understanding now that you've worked in this industry for a few years. But looking back, if you could give yourself one piece of advice when you started your career, what would that be?
I think it would be that fragmentation is the enemy of distinctiveness. And the reason why I say that is consulting gives you so many opportunities. And most people who join McKinsey or other firms, I'm sure, are very curious. And so you cross curiosity with opportunity, and it leads to doing a lot of things. And it's fantastic. Uh, but it's important to make choices. It's not choices forever, but it's choices at a moment because it allows you to be as good as you can be at doing thing number one, thing number two. So to me, if I had understood earlier how fragmentation reduces effectiveness and just the end quality of the experience, maybe I would have done a few things less here and there.
Hmm.
Um, I think you discover that through life, but I wish I'd discovered it earlier.
That's amazing. And our final question to conclude our interview today, is there like a quote or principle, a movie, a person, or anything that really shaped your experience in a way that it has constantly guided your work understanding the consulting industry?
So there's a lot of quotes that I really like. One which I find is quite applicable to the world of consulting, to work in businesses. I'm probably going to butcher it. It's Einstein. It says, "Everybody is a genius, but if you judge a fish by its ability to climb a tree, it will live its whole life thinking it is stupid or it's an
Hmm.
idiot." Um, and that matters. Going back to the concept of teams, and actually, it's even more turbocharged, I would say, in consulting because you have a way of thinking that is usually reinforced because you're at a business table where diversity is not necessarily optimized. So it could be easy to fall into the trap that, like, okay, that's the way to understand things, so on. And if you want to get to impact at organizational level, at societal level, everybody brings something to the puzzle. So you got to understand what that is. So that quote to me represents like that, like, take time to understand what is somebody's skill, what are they bringing to the table, and what matters to them.
Yeah.
Because they're all going to be a part, everybody's going to be a part of the end answer if you solve it
Yes.
societally, organizationally as well. So it's easy to make a call quickly on like, oh, they can't do that. But I
Yeah.
think often that's a little bit precipitous.
Yeah, I
So
agree. It's a really nice way to finish our interview, saying that everyone has their own strengths and we all come together as a whole, and we're made humans to complete each other and not to compete each other.
yeah,
So that's a really nice way to end our interview today. I wanted to thank you for taking the time on a Friday afternoon to join us, to
my
explain us
pleasure.
everything. You're
Super professional setup. It's good to meet you guys. It was a pleasure.
nice meeting you too. Thank you so much, Eric, for everything. We learn a lot, and I'm sure we'd be more than happy to hear more about your career on another episode. Thank
Good.
you.
Thank you.
Thank you.